thoughts, concerns? I know there's plenty of concerns.
I said grave concerns, temporal concerns. I mean, that was great. I think we both felt the burn of figuring out how to like dealing with our mutual caution about approaching the story and figuring out how to like what's best as role players, what's best as performers, and finding like dealing with the stagnation of like, well, what happens when you're trying to track down somebody in the middle of the day, like and get answers and solve these problems. It's not,
but it felt honest. It wasn't. Yeah. This wasn't like you being like, I just want to play in 1958. This was more of like, what can we use? Like, what do we have? Like, what can we do?
Mostly, I'm a little worried about the entertainment value.
I was worried about that.
This is an actual play. This is what happens in an actual play that isn't edited, but does have live Foley work, and it was still great. Doug,
and an experiment in that this is very open sandbox. There were I like. If anything, I was worried early on by Doc trying to explain how time travel works and like what's at risk.
You did such a good job of the conversations with Doc, the like all the work you did studying like quantum mechanics, to be able to feel the comfort of portraying him. I mean, Doug, I can tell all the work that you've done, like it just oozes from you, because I know if I was in your position, I wouldn't be able to fake it like that. So I mean, I know you've done a lot of work. You've done a lot of work. I think I probably don't know the half of it, because like the confidence at which you're able to portray a complex character like Dr. Brown, who, much like, I don't know, playing race dance, like requires a degree of knowledge of a certain kind of like
these are real notes and these are real notes.
That's a lot of notes.
But everything else was for your benefit as I was holding the pages.
Right. So why on earth did you make these really beautiful like decorative pages to hold up? You made props that were just for me in terms of so you could hold notes and that they would look like
they would look like Doc's notes.
Yeah.
Just because it's physical paper, little pieces of paper out of a notebook, blank with no lines on it. But I realized if I'm holding my notes in front of me, you'd be looking at the back, and I'm like, well, if you're looking at the back, I may as well just give you something to look at to sound like they're Doc's notes.
That's so much like Doc like creating a whole scale model of the town. That's completely unnecessary, but really nice.
But if like on the back it was just blank pieces of paper, you're like, all right, well, Doug's got notes in front of him. But if I'm like, oh no, these are Doc's notes, because it's on the back.
Yeah, I know, but like, I mean, we're playing an actual play that no one else is seeing. I think that's the degree of precision that Doug Banks represents. Is like that is like well beyond a cherry on top. That's a very like that's a detail. It's a very intense detail. And they look great. Like I want to see them up close, but like from here I've been
Well, really these were already things in my notebook with most of the words on here are completely unrelated. They were due to work or something.
Okay.
And then I just doodled on top of them and then added
some
like
time cubes and some flux capacitors.
Yeah, some of these actually are fifth dimensional shapes projected onto a two-dimensional thing. So like that, like this outline thing here at the center looks like a weird diamond thing. That's a fifth dimensional shape, and but the shadow of a fifth dimensional shape on a two-dimensional surface.
Right.
Same goes for that one. That's also a fifth dimensional shape. That's a 5 simplex. Apparently, 15 cells, 6 hypercells, 20 faces. It's a 20-faced cube.
I see that now. Yeah, there's a lot of boy, geometry's wild.
Yeah. And then they have an outline of a DeLorean with almost like a shopping list of things he would have to get, like need computer interlock system, high pressure turbine generator, rear temporal demodulation coils 2, and then in all caps, water coolant tank. Because there's a nuclear reactor on the back of this thing.
Yeah.
And then I had to find out, I read more into how nuclear reactors work, which is why he doesn't just need plutonium, he needs plutonium-239. There's different kinds. Plutonium-239 is an isotope, which means it's not like a naturally occurring plutonium. It's like one that's made because a neutron is transferred over. You're firing you fire neutrons into you fire neutrons at uranium rods, and when those change, like the neutrons will either attach or knock other uranium neutrons loose with other uraniums, cause a nuclear chain reaction, which causes the heat, which causes them to spin the turbines, which causes the turbine spinning, which means power.
Yeah.
But when you do that, sometimes uranium will either gain or lose, and I can't remember. I think it gains a neutron, and if uranium gains a neutron, it becomes plutonium-239, and then you can use plutonium-239 again to do another nuclear reaction another time. So I think
cost saving
a little.
plutonium.
I think if I remember correctly, I could be completely wrong, and if any scientist hears this, will be like, "Oh my god, he's fucking up." But it's my understanding that I think like a third, like 1/3 of the uranium that's used in nuclear reactors becomes plutonium-239, and then they can take those and reuse them, but then they reuse them again and they can become something else that's not usable. Plutonium-239 is useful as part of, because it can cause that chain reaction,
right?
But other ones cannot. So sometimes uranium is spent and it's spent and that's it. Sometimes it becomes plutonium-239, it gets reused, and then sometimes whatever. Using plutonium-239. And in fact, plutonium, I was like, Doc always used, and that was another thing I was researching. I'm like, why did Doc use plutonium when every major factory or every major reactor uses uranium? And plutonium is way more dangerous. And I think it's like, because if you breathe in a speck of plutonium, you would fucking die. Like, not just die, you would fucking die. And if like a handful of dust of plutonium was thrown into the air and cast to the wind, like 2 million people would die. It is insane.
Whoa.
Yeah,
that's a crazy. That's like, a lot of people.
Yeah, it's like it would be a national disaster. So that's why it's really dangerous, and that's why
I'm kind of surprised that hasn't happened. People are not very smart with how they handle
Chernobyl.
This material.
The thing, and it's but people, it's really dangerous to think what would happen if someone like the Libyan terrorists did get a hold of of not even just a nuclear bomb, but just plutonium in a physical form or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't. Plutonium-239 is not made in nature. You can't just go find it in a mine or something like that. So there's no problem with that. But the one of the biggest problems about nuclear reactors as a power source for our society is that they become immediate targets. If anyone wanted to do harm, they would do it there, and it would do more than just cripple the electronics. It could be really bad.
Yeah.
But this is all very 1980s, Cold War wrapping up, nuclear stuff.
So did you ever come up with a good reason why Doc would use this specific plutonium rather than uranium?
I think the plutonium-239 might be easier to steal and get a hold of, whereas uranium,
because it's a waste product.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Because it's considered, in a way, it's considered a waste product. It's probably much easier to get hold of. And there's different types of nuclear reactors out there that do different things. The most common being like a water kind. I can't remember the official term. I knew this at 2 a.m. last night. I knew all this, but now I've just sort of osmosis. I slept on it, and I've retained what I thought was important. It's the plutonium-239 is an isotope of plutonium. It's primary fissile isotope for so primarily plutonium-239 is what's used in nuclear weapons.
Oh, okay. I feel like that's maybe like why the Libyan nationalists or whatever.
No, that's specifically why they wanted
it.
Yeah. So really, Doc needs a nuclear reaction, and what he got was plutonium. He maybe could have done it with uranium, but plutonium was what was available. You had a very interesting talk at the cafe.
That thing's got heavy.
Yeah. I will say it's interesting. I hadn't I'd familiarized myself with Doc's history and stuff and tried to get into the headspace of like why, trying to think about why doing those certain things or whatever. I don't know how much of it you knew beforehand going in.
I mean, I knew all of it.
Yeah.
But I read those comics when they came out, which has been years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So
to me the idea of it does say I think there's a lot of stuff if someone knew all the details about Doc's backstory, which you can go check it out, either read the comics because they're really great, or if you just even look at the Wikipedia. I wonder what a psychotherapist would say. It was like the need to look into time travel after being part of something, one of the darkest moments in human history.
Yeah, and that's not where his focus is. Like he's not focusing on doing it.
And it's like, I mean, but like the draw to it of like, oh, we can beat the Nazis with science, and you're like, yeah. And then it's like, you helped us make the bomb. No, like how awful. Like I couldn't,
And you were still, even after that, you were still willing to trust the military-industrial complex
after it was abused you, But then seeing it and then being like, yeah, no, it wasn't just a time and place. It was this is how it goes. I mean, living at that time too, growing up, being a child when World War I was a thing, and then living in a post World War I America where, we're gearing up and we're going to fight the Nazis and the patriotism is a really big thing and trying to weed out the commies and, and all that shit. And, the idea of like, well, if I'm going to be a scientist and I make my living doing big science, the type of science I want to do can't be funded by a university or a school.
Yeah.
And if he's talking about unraveling the fabric of the universe to basically explore a branch of science, which in reality we still can't even explore really. Like we have theories and it's a lot of thought put into it, but you can't really run that experiment in a lab.
No, I mean, I suppose the problem is that Doc Brown is not a businessman.
Right.
If he was, he would get some patents, just...
This is the same guy who literally shook hands with a group of Libyan terrorists to get plutonium.
Yeah.
Granted, he didn't provide them plutonium. He didn't provide them a bomb.
I'd say he's a creative who doesn't have any acumen, and that's fine. But if he wanted to change the world for the better, he already is loaded. He has more than enough money to fund small projects that could if he say he was the one who invented the Walkman for Sony. Right. If he had the right contracts in place, he'd be loaded.
I don't know if he's interested in providing a product to people.
But it's a means to an end. It's a short-term goal for long-term success, like in terms of small inventions that can help, that could circumvent the need for the military-industrial complex to bankroll larger world-changing experiments.
Yeah. I mean, that's that he lacks a lot of acumen to think in those terms, I'm sure. But yeah, pitch that idea his way.
Yeah. Doc Brown's gonna give us the clean energy solutions. I mean, okay, so this is a guy who, I mean, this is ridiculous because I don't know that I can say any of this because this is not Kate's knowledge, but one of the biggest steps for the proliferation of solar technology is extending and advancing battery technology. And here's a guy who knows a lot about energy consumption and the dispersal of it and everything else because he's been doing stuff with
shit in his garage.
Yeah, creating smaller time travel mechanisms years and years back, far before the original DeLorean happened.
And I'll say even purely by happenstance of how I imagined his character would react to certain things. Again, you couldn't have planned for this, but earlier when he was like, "Oh, isn't everyone in the future vegetarian?" and you're like, "No," and he's like, "Why not?" And not in terms of moral reasons, but the amount of energy it takes to produce that and the population growing as fast as it can, it's unsustainable. He even has that mind.
I love that bit
to recognize this, and he has these visions of the future that are not at all accurate, but to him make sense from his point in time.
And I think what's interesting about what he's given Kate in terms of perspective is that she's like, yeah, it should be better. Why the fuck aren't you making it better?
And
you're fucking around with a time machine, dude.
And reminds me of the line in the first movie where he's just like, "What's this thing I'm wearing?" And Marty's like, "It's a radiation suit." He goes, "Radiation suit, of course, because of the fallout from all the atomic wars." This dude made the bomb. He has a vision of what people do with these things. And if there's a way to stop it, I don't think he built the machine to make himself a superhero. But I think he built the machine to see if humanity makes it, and if not, how do you fix it?
So then he's willing to change the past.
I mean, I think it's I think if you go into the future and you see that it turns into like H.G. Wells's The Time Machine, you'd be like, oh, this can't be good, something bad happened at some point, and once you have that knowledge, don't you have a responsibility, I guess, That's the other thing. It's with great power and all that stuff, I don't know. It's this things that the comic barely dived into, and but I find interesting.
For this Doc Brown, more so than most of the other variable Doc Browns.
And there's been a few. Yeah.
This life is time travel has caused nothing but pain and misery.
Yeah. Which is why he says as soon as things get fixed, it's done.
It can't ever be overstated that the Doug Banks roleplay experience is above and beyond.
Well, thank you.
Doug, you really outdo yourself. It's overwhelming and
Well, I hope it's at least entertaining to listen to.
okay, so as we've documented on Nerdy Show Things in the past, I did Secret Cinema's Back to the Future presentation.
Yeah.
So I've actually been to Hill Valley about as much as anyone can, aside from going to the back lot where they filmed it.
Or have made the film.
Yeah. I was in a scale recreation of Back to the Future. Now, if this is the first you're hearing of it, it's a longer conversation. Maybe we'll like revisit that at a later time. But like,
Good conversation too.
yeah.
I'm forever envious.
I'm forever surprised that it is the thing that happened. It's like, I mean, because much like, it's interesting. I've had a lot of Back to the Future surprises in my life. Oh, let's just go into it. Might as well. So like, so I was in England. I went over there because Kate Bush was doing her first live concert in like 30 years, and I adore her. So I was like, I'm gonna spend a ludicrous amount of money for the concert that I want most in the entire world, probably for the rest of my life. And I don't think that I'm ever going to find the equal of it. It was amazing. So she put on this ludicrous show, and I went over to London and stayed with a friend. But then while I was there, he was like, what are you putting on?
I was playing 50s music because you're going to talk about going to 50s.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He was like, okay, like, just bring an outfit that would be sort of innocuous for the 1950s. And I was like, all right, that's interesting. And I have no idea. I don't recall what I was wearing. Because I was presenting as non-binary at the time. But my wardrobe was largely like, I don't know. It was, I guess my wardrobe was pretty like weird in terms of like in the middle, mixing and matching stuff. I don't recall what I sorted out as being like a 1950s-esque thing that I would be comfortable in. But, we get on the train, and then we end up somewhere, and I've started to see other people in like full blown like 1950s get-ups, and I'm like, what the hell is happening? And so then he's like, all right, so since this is we're here, I was just going to tell you what it is. There's this thing called Secret Cinema where they play, they do these presentations where they do screenings of films, but they go all out prepping them to happen. So in this case, they've made a scale recreation of Hill Valley, and we're all going to go there with like our identities. Like they've given us identities of who we're going to be. And I don't know what's going to happen, but we go here, we watch the film eventually, we go home. It was the most insane thing. Like, basically, I've been surprised by being accidentally in Back to the Future twice now in my life, which is an unusual thing.
Fool me once.
Yeah.
Shame on you.
So you enter through Twin Pines and or Lone Pine Farm. You relinquish your cell phone. No, you're not allowed to film anything that's happening there. You're not allowed to take any pictures. You can buy a disposable camera as like a souvenir to figure out how to get that developed on film or whatever. But then you walk up through like past the gates of Lion Estates and through like all the like the small housing developments on the outside of town, and these are represented by like the town was recreated on top of like a hill, and we start at the bottom of the hill to sort of work our way up. And the houses were passed. Some of them are just facades of like miniaturizations, like sort of like not optical illusions in terms of like their scale, but just sort of small houses that suggest the idea of you walking through those like suburbs. But some of them are open, like these like wooden one-room kind of like clubhouse recreations of a highly miniaturized 1950s household. And there'll be things like a television that's working that has like video from the 1950s in there, and like there'll be people there. You're both there with people who are attendees, all who have been asked to be in character, and you're also there with actors, all of whom are in character. And so in that house, there's a phone that you can like, you pick up the phone, and all of a sudden you're talking with an operator, and you hear like radios in the background. Then they're broadcasting a radio show, like quote unquote broadcasting, that you can hear like playing all over the place. There's a They've got the Texaco station, and the malt shop is a functional, like it's larger in scale than it is in the film because they need to accommodate the crowds. But they have a fully functional, malt shop. Goldie Wilson's there. Like all the characters from the film, incidental or otherwise, are somehow represented. The clock tower is there in scale. The movie theater is playing Cattle Queen of Montana, the film starring Ronald Reagan. You walk into the building, and it's like this, like, I don't know, a box that they've set up that has seats, and they're screening that film in there at this other film screening. There's a barbershop you can get your hair cut. There's like this like abstract recreation of Hill Valley High School that you can walk through and get harassed by Mr. Strickland, which I did. He called me a slacker. Everybody I guess they're meant to be, everybody was there as sort of a high school student, so we all had lockers. There was a dance going on, like it was decorated to be like the Enchantment Under the Sea. Fish under the sea dance. And then to make sure that everybody had like a plethora of amusements for the hours that we were out there, just like experiencing Hill Valley and role playing with other characters, and like it was like, it's live theater, so like you're doing, sometimes some people will get like involved in like weird fetch quests and different sort of competitions and stuff that was happening all around them. At this point, like it's like this, it's a very vivid and yet also fuzzy memory. I don't know what episode of Nerdy Show I recounted this on, but it's
right. But I remember, like you told me all the details after it happened, and I was just so jealous I didn't get to go and like see it. But it was,
yeah.
And they haven't really done anything that big since, I don't think.
No, there was a fair. They built a fairground, so there was like this, like, just, I don't know, Hill Valley, like harvest fair or something like that. So you could go on like a Ferris wheel and so on, just to like as different things to distract you like during that time. And then when it came time to actually play the film, everybody got out on the lawn, like seated in the grass in front of the clock tower, and the screening happened, projected like on a screen in front of the clock tower. But then as it's happening, there's all kinds of stuff happening around you. The streets have been cleared. So when the DeLorean's doing its run, the DeLorean comes out. The DeLorean's being chased by the Libyans. The Libyans have a rocket launcher. There are pyrotechnics. When Doc's sliding down from, Marty's, there's a whole chase that happens at the, with Marty and Biff with skateboard and all that. That's happening like live around you, and Marty's like gripping onto the back of a car. Like there's an actor on a skateboard. Doc slides down the railing to get to the pole to clasp everything together, and the DeLorean speeds off, and they figured out how to do tire trails. It was incredible, like absolutely jaw-dropping. This shouldn't have happened, and it was amazing. And they actually they were meant to do it for just a little while. They ended up extending it. It was so successful. I'm under the impression that Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis came out to it, or at least Bob Gale, and there was actually talks of doing one in America. Secret Cinema is exclusively something that happens in the UK, and this is just one. Perhaps you can watch a video and
they've done dozens.
Yeah, they've done so many. This is probably the biggest one, but there are some others that are equally kind of baffling in scope, like the one they did for Brazil. But they've never done it in America, to my knowledge. And but the next year, the year after this, was going to be Back to the Future's 30th anniversary. And so they were going to do it in America on the Universal Studios backlot, and it didn't pan out.
Is this around the time the backlot caught fire?
I don't know.
Maybe that had something to do with it.
Maybe. I knew somebody I know was potentially getting a job that would have been one of the different facets of facilitating making that event possible. So there were lots of eyes on is it going to happen? And then I was determined to make it to go again, because it was one of the craziest experiences of my entire life. Yeah, it's amazing. If you can ever do something like that, I highly recommend it. You can sign up for Secret Cinema updates on their website. I haven't checked in years as to what's going on. I mean, if you're in the UK and you're not doing this you please do this.
I mean, it's pandemic time, but
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot. Like, I've been in a different reality for a little while, like jumping through time.
Yeah.
I sort of forgot about that whole how there's probably never going to be a secret cinema ever again. That's very sad. I mean, or the pandemic ends somehow. But yeah. So, that's an abbreviated version of the story, far removed from time. But do search the video for it. They don't let anybody film there, but they do produce their own sort of documentation of what happened. I mean, that's a lot of hard work to encapsulate, and it only scratches the surface of how immersive and crazy it was. It was phenomenal. All their actors were superb. It's a real achievement, and I'm so lucky to have been able to witness that.
That's like I had forgotten that I had competition to to try to make you feel like you were going back in time into an area that you had physically seen in one form, where I have not.
I mean, I've seen the abstract paper cutout version of it that's to scale, but But
I've only seen the movie.
Yeah.
I've ridden the ride, but that's different. Yeah, but anyway, so because of that experience, how I wonder if that experience informed a lot of the gaps that you otherwise might have had in trying to picture Hill Valley at this time and try to give a feeling and slip into that mindset, I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean there's also a bit of a weird gulf of I was not raised as female, nor was I was not raised as female in the 1950s, and there's a huge gulf of information there. So in a lot of ways, Kate is me, living a past that I didn't exactly have, and then Kate has to deal with this other past. So I'm I feel like I'm two steps removed from having any sense of confidence in stepping into that space and not feeling like I'm really fucking it up. Because I mean, it's not. I'm very fortunate to not have to worry generally about in my daily life about how I'm being regarded or having to perform in a kind of certain way for my own safety or whatever. But the experience of women has changed a lot in the past 60 years.
Women don't have to put their measurements on their resume anymore.
Ugh.
For office work.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're a model, that's important, but for just a regular job.
So I was trying to consider all the things that I don't know, all the things that I've sort of passively received in terms of that information, and figuring out how to exist in that space safely. And I think I was overthinking it, but
you brought a realistic sense of someone from 2016 knowing those things about the past, and then finding yourself there, and you can't help but be I don't like this aspect of it, and I'm uncomfortable here, and and all the baggage that would come with it. I at least felt was honest to what the character would have done.
I can't even imagine just holy shit, the complexity that if I had been well, no, I'm not gonna play a character who was assigned female at birth. I'm gonna actually play a trans character, and that trans character is gonna time travel. Oh no,
it would cause a lot of problems for people back then. You want to play Back to the Future on hard mode?
Yeah, that's I think a lot of problems for everybody. Most of all for the trans individual who's stuck in the 1950s.
Yeah, but
and then you and I would have to have very difficult conversations about passing and equating that really nasty social concept into
right. But even then, it wouldn't be about condoning following
of course
whatever society norms at the time, but rather how do you survive in a time such as this?
Yeah,
and how awful it must have been, for people who were trying to go through something like that. I mean, and that's to say nothing about just being a woman back then, or being a person of color.
Yeah,
fucking forget it.
Yeah, if any, I mean, because the whole time I'm playing this, I'm thinking holy shit, Marty as like a white male character archetype, like has it so easy. Yeah, he doesn't know what's going on, but he's only fearing for his life when he's like actively confronting somebody.
Right.
Not like he's never passively worried.
Yeah.
And the whole time I'm thinking like, when and how is this world gonna come and get me?
Well, because if you do something wrong, it draws more attention to you than if a guy did it.
And also I'm playing it more. I think Kate's far more of a teenage child than Marty.
Yeah. Marty wanted to be a rock star. He's a little more out and about.
I guess. And I'm only playing to my own experience, and I was not like, fuck, I have this, maybe I'm doing the character an injustice because this is someone who has I'd say this is a character who has the confidence to do drugs. I would not say that's not the headspace I was in as a young person. I could have if I wanted to, but I didn't want to.
I don't know if it was necessarily the confidence to do it so much as the desperate need for escape from this awful moment of realization of what was at stake.
Oh, well, in that scene,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely. But I mean, just like in terms of like Kate's daily life prior to time travel.
Well, she also lived under the term of President Tannen, and he just got reelected.
Yeah.
And it's Thanksgiving weekend, and
Yeah, and I think one thing that I like about Kate's world, her personal world, is like that she has like. I was a weird teenager, but I was not able to see myself as a queer teenager. And I think that experience would have changed my time during that time of my life a great deal. Especially would be a better thing. That's a better thing to be in 2016 than it would have been in like 1999 to 2003.
Yeah.
But I think my group was probably just about as like queer as it could be with that while being like heteronormative as far as anybody knew.
And these kind of conversations we're having, I think, are interesting because I always thought that you see a time travel movie, you go, wow, cool. And you think about what it'd be like to time travel. But what I had hoped that if you played the game, not just you, like the royal you, like everyone, if anyone who can play a true time travel game and feel like they've been somewhere else, even if it's just in their imagination, can hopefully re-examine where they are and just say like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I've talked to people before, like, oh man, I feel like I was born in the wrong decade. I'm like, not me. I don't want to go back. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't go back.
It's bad.
There's like, yeah, but the music and movies. I'm like, yeah, movies are great. Music was great. All that was great. I can enjoy that now. Fashion was great. Fashion kind of weird now, but every fashion's weird wherever you go. Every time you go, people think it's weird. But, AIDS, that was a problem.
Yeah.
People were scared and doing dumb shit and blaming the wrong people, and the crack epidemic, being released in the streets to control people and shit, like, and war on drugs, and we still have a war on drugs, but like there's so many bad things that people of privilege, and I'm lumping myself in that category, didn't have to go through.
Not to mention like how heavy the notion of like nuclear war was weighing on people's psyche. Like it was a different psychological construct for the people who were like of age in the 1980s than it was for us growing up, where like it
was in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, by the time that we were old enough to really be paying attention to geopolitics, it was over.
Yeah, even in Terminator 2, when he's just like, why would we launch an attack at Russia? Aren't they our friends? Like, why would Russia attack us?
Yeah.
It was like, Cold War's done, dude. Why would that happen? And then Terminator has to explain, well, because humans have developed a system of counterattacks. Like, because even though the war is over, we'll still fucking kill you. Like that kind of thing, which I guess that's part of the theming of that story.
Yeah, I think about time travel a lot, especially through a trans lens, because I think something that at least in my experience that I do a lot is I think about either at what point would I go back in time to tell my like young self like, hey, you're trans, like get on this sooner, which of course is also problematic because I think that really probably
the struggle is what made you who you are.
Yeah, like I know that like I think that that's actually like me realizing that about myself sooner is a very dangerous prospect for the kinds of like trouble I could have gotten into if that was something that I was dealing with under those circumstances from the past that I know.
Right.
I basically I think about time travel in a lot of different contexts all the time.
Oh, yeah, I think, but if you look back on your life, even myself, it's like, oh man, if I could have avoided that, I'm like, yeah, but if I did, I wouldn't have been who I am.
Yeah, but then like there's like thinking about the social constraints of being female or being trans at certain time periods is just overwhelming, and I can't even begin to grasp the weight of that. I am prepared. I feel like I'm prepared to like continue stepping forward into building a better world, and that forward momentum in spite of everything else happening around me, like, and the fact there are other people like also like putting this energy out. It helps me like get through the day and feel really good about things. But you go back in time and look at how much like especially if you're trapped and think about how far you have to go, it becomes a very strange kind of prison.
Yeah.
Unless you're a white male, heterosexual.
Yeah. And then you're just a warden. You're still at the jail though.
Yeah.
You're just holding the keys. Yeah. But no, that's but that was one of the many things I wanted to play with a time travel RPG, and Back to the Future is a easy touchstone for people to relate to. But the feeling of going through time, the weight of the gravity of like what these little changes could do and the dire consequences it could have, the Back to the Future seemed to have been the perfect storyline to explore those ideas and push the ideas even further than where they were in the films. So I'm glad you were like still feeling like, what the fuck, like with each new revelation of, oh yeah, well if you do this you might disappear or not, but if we don't then this, and yeah, you're like, what about alternate dimension, what about alternate timelines? Well yeah, but even if there are alternate timelines we can't get there, like we can't just hop to that time, we can only stay on the rail that we're on.
I have lived in a lot of different role-playing games, but in a lot of ways they never there's just so much that's different about this. Like this is so much more personal because it's not our timeline, but it is our world, and it's a character who's like isn't me, but like has some shared experiences, and as a result, this is a completely different experience from all of them, and I do feel like I'm living this. Like I can perform a scene as Estelle and be like in those emotions. I can cry, like, and have cried many times, like as a character, because like I put myself in that place and I lived in those moments. But this is, in terms of like the comfort that I feel, the helplessness and panic that I feel of actually like dealing with the gravity of being in this situation. Something about those parameters and its tether to our world, to the degree that it has, is much more than Call of Cthulhu, even though that's still in our world, and much more than any medieval fantasy setting. So this experiment is buck wild.
Okay.
Like,
good.
Yeah.
I won't add anything to that in the hopes that I won't ruin it. So I'm good to call it there if you are.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. We'll see you next time.